Subscribe to my channel to never miss the most thrilling love and mafia stories. I never thought one careless remark could change my life forever. It started as a joke, just a passing comment during a high-profile charity gala in New York City. The room was glittering with crystal chandeliers, the air thick with perfume and money, and there he was, Dominic Moretti, the man everyone whispered about but no one dared approach. The infamous mafia boss with a reputation that could freeze the blood in your veins. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a designer suit that probably cost more than my apartment, and he had that cold, unreadable gaze that seemed to strip you bare the moment it landed on you. I smirked, loud enough for the few people nearby to hear, and whispered, "An idiot in an expensive suit." Immediately, I felt the weight of my words. Dominic's eyes snapped to me, sharp and calculating, like a predator that had just been insulted in its own den. The chatter around me seemed to freeze, the laughter dying on people's lips. I wanted to disappear, but there was no escaping the magnetic pull of his presence. He moved toward me slowly, each step deliberate, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. My heart was racing, a mix of fear and something I wasn't ready to admit, curiosity. "Did you just call me an idiot?" His voice was low, velvet smooth, but every word carried the kind of authority that could command armies. People stared, waiting for my reaction, but all I could do was nod, biting back a nervous laugh. I was joking," I stammered, but Dominic didn't smile. Instead, he studied me as if trying to decipher every hidden thought in my mind. By the end of that evening, I thought that would be the last I'd see of him. But Dominic Moretti doesn't forget. And he certainly doesn't forgive easily, especially when someone dares to mock him in public. Within days, my world changed. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from unknown numbers. My apartment felt suddenly too exposed, and strangers began watching me in ways that made my skin crawl. And then there were the invitations, outrageous, impossible, and always with a note. "For you. Don't make me wait." I tried to ignore it, thinking I could outsmart a man like Dominic by keeping my distance. But every corner of my life began to feel like a stage set for his attention. My favorite coffee shop, there he was, casually sipping an espresso and smiling that cold, dangerous smile that made me want to run and freeze at the same time. My office. A new client, introducing himself with the most charming smirk I had ever seen, Dominic. Even when I thought I was safe in the quiet of my apartment, I would find flowers on my doorstep. Not just flowers, expensive, exotic blooms with little cards that read, "You belong in my world." The truth is, I should have been terrified. Every warning in my head screamed at me to stay away. But Dominic Moretti had a way of bending reality, of making fear and desire dance together until you couldn't tell them apart. And somehow, I found myself drawn to him, even as I despised the power he held over my life. He was chaos wrapped in a suit, danger wrapped in charm, and I had unwittingly put myself directly in his path. Then came the night that changed everything. I was leaving a friend's rooftop party when I noticed a sleek black car following me. My pulse spiked and I took a detour thinking I could shake whoever it was. But the car stayed. My phone rang and the caller ID showed a name I wasn't supposed to ever hear again, Dominic Moretti. "Don't run," he said simply, as though reading my thoughts. "I'm not just interested in you mocking me, I'm obsessed." That was the moment I realized. I had just invited a storm into my life, and storms like Dominic Moretti never pass quietly. The next few days felt like living inside a whirlwind I couldn't escape. Everywhere I went, there were reminders of Dominic Moretti's presence. At first, it was subtle. A black luxury sedan idling outside my favorite bookstore, a pair of dark sunglasses reflecting my nervous glances back at me. Then it escalated. A bouquet of white orchids left on my doorstep one morning, a single card that simply read, "I know your favorite flowers. That means something, doesn't it?" I tried to shrug it off, convincing myself I was imagining the growing tension in my life. But deep down, I knew Dominic was orchestrating every move. It was during a late-night work session at my office that I saw him for the first time in person since the rooftop encounter. The office building's glass doors reflected the empty streets outside, but then I saw the sharp silhouette of him standing just beyond the entrance, leaning casually against the car. His eyes locked with mine, and for a moment I felt my chest tighten in both fear and exhilaration. He didn't enter. He never had to. His presence alone commanded attention, bending the room to him. My hands shook as I picked up the phone to leave a quick voicemail for my friend, and he seemed to sense it. He smiled, a small, dangerous curve of his lips, and vanished before I could blink. I couldn't sleep that night. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow on the walls seemed to stretch into something menacing. I hated that he had this power over me, but there was a part of me that couldn't stop thinking about him. The audacity, the danger, the magnetic pull, it was intoxicating. I hated myself for feeling that way, hated him even more for making me feel it. The next morning, I tried to reclaim some sense of normalcy. I stopped by my favorite cafe, hoping that the familiar smell of roasted coffee beans and warm pastries could ground me. For 30 minutes, I felt almost normal, until I heard a familiar deep voice behind me. "Fancy seeing you here." I turned, heart in my throat. Dominic Moretti was standing by the counter, impeccably dressed, perfectly calm, and yet entirely terrifying. He didn't wait for an invitation. He simply slid into the seat across from me. People in the cafe avoided our table, sensing the silent tension that radiated between us. "I said I was obsessed," he murmured, almost casually, as if he had just made a statement about the weather. "And I don't make idle threats." I tried to maintain my composure, gripping my coffee cup like a lifeline. "You're persistent," I managed to say, forcing a weak laugh. "Persistent," he repeated, his eyes narrowing. "I call it attentive. I know what I want and I don't let obstacles, especially smart-mouthed obstacles, stand in my way." The audacity of him made me want to scream, but also it made my pulse race. Every nerve in my body was on high alert, a chaotic mix of fear and something I didn't want to admit, curiosity, desire, fascination. I told myself he was dangerous, that I should run, but the truth was, part of me wanted him to lean closer, wanted him to cross the invisible line that kept him at bay. Days passed, each one escalating the tension. Mysterious invitations arrived, dinners at exclusive restaurants, tickets to events I could never imagine affording, private viewings of art galleries after hours. Each time, the accompanying note reminded me of his obsessive attention. "I don't like waiting. Come to me." I felt trapped between terror and temptation. Then came the first real test of just how far Dominic would go. My apartment had always been a sanctuary, a place where I could shut the world out. But one evening, returning from a late shift at work, I found my door ajar. My pulse raced as I stepped inside, expecting the worst. And there he was, sitting on my sofa, legs crossed, a glass of red wine in his hand, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "You weren't expecting me," he said softly, his voice a silky threat. But I couldn't resist. I swallowed hard, trying to maintain some shred of authority. "You can't just come into people's homes." "Why not?" he asked, leaning back casually as though he owned the space. "You mocked me. You invited this. You made it personal. And now, well, I can't leave you alone." I wanted to run, but the sight of him, so confident, so commanding, kept me rooted. My mind screamed danger, but every instinct in my body was at war. I hated the power he had over me. I hated that I wanted to stay. Over the following weeks, Dominic became an unstoppable presence in my life. Every encounter, every message, every gift, each was a reminder that I had ignited a storm I couldn't control. Friends warned me, strangers gave cautious glances when I mentioned his name, and I even considered leaving the city, thinking that distance could save me. But Dominic always found a way to reach me. One night, I received a text that made my blood run cold. "I'm closer than you think. Don't ignore me." It came with a location, a private yacht docked in the harbor. I hesitated, torn between fear and something I couldn't name. Against every rational thought, I went. The yacht was stunning, illuminated with soft golden lights, waves lapping against the hull. And there he was, waiting, Dominic Moretti with that dangerous, intoxicating smile. "I knew you'd come," he said. "You can't resist me, and I won't let you go." In that moment, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating. Dominic Moretti wasn't just obsessed, he was relentless. And the longer I tried to resist, the more entangled I became in his world of power, danger, and obsession. My life had changed forever, and there was no turning back. The night on the yacht left me both exhilarated and terrified. Dominic's world was intoxicating, a dangerous cocktail of wealth, power, and sheer unpredictability. I couldn't deny that part of me was drawn to him, even though every rational thought screamed to stay away. The way he looked at me, like he could read my thoughts and desires before I even admitted them to myself, made my pulse race. But I knew better than to trust him, or at least I told myself I did. The following morning, I woke to find a single message on my phone. "Breakfast is waiting. Don't be late." It was unsigned, but there was no mistaking the handwriting of someone who had made it very clear he was always watching. Reluctantly, I left my apartment, heart pounding as I approached a sleek black car waiting outside. The driver didn't need directions. As the door opened, Dominic was already seated inside, casually reviewing some documents, yet his eyes flicked up to me the moment I approached. He smiled, slow and dangerous, as though he knew he had me exactly where he wanted. "Good morning," he said, his tone smooth but commanding. "You look apprehensive, I like it." I bristled, gripping my bag tighter. "I'm not here to play your games." "Games?" He raised an eyebrow, leaning back as though considering my words. "No, this isn't a game. This is life. And life is more thrilling when you stop running." He didn't wait for me to respond. The car moved through the city streets, taking me to a private rooftop cafe I had never seen before. The view was breathtaking, the skyline glowing against the dawn, the city alive beneath us. And there, at a table set for two, was breakfast. Not ordinary breakfast, freshly baked croissants, exotic fruits, champagne, and coffee served in crystal cups. Every detail screamed wealth and precision, but what unnerved me most was that he had anticipated everything I liked. Every choice, every preference, laid out as if he had been watching me for years. "You planned all this?" I asked, unable to mask the mixture of awe and irritation in my voice. "Of course," he said, smiling as though my reaction was amusing. "I notice things, I remember things, and I make sure the people I care about experience only the best." "Care about?" I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. "You barely know me." He chuckled, leaning closer. The warmth of his presence was disorienting, like standing too close to a fire. "I know enough to see that you're different, enough to know I don't want to let you go." I wanted to pull away, to tell him he was dangerous, insane, and relentless. But every time I tried, I felt myself drawn closer. His voice, his gaze, the way he moved through the world as though it belonged to him, all of it made resisting impossible. And yet, I reminded myself that obsession could be deadly. Dominic Moretti was a man with enemies, with power that extended far beyond my understanding. Being close to him meant stepping into a storm that could destroy me. Despite my warnings, he continued to infiltrate every corner of my life. The next days were a blur of whispered texts, mysterious gifts, and chance encounters that weren't so chance at all. At the grocery store, a bouquet of lilies appeared in my cart, accompanied by a note. "Even mundane places are better with me in them." At the gym, he appeared, effortlessly making his presence known without saying a word, just a glance that left me both rattled and curious. I began to realize something terrifying. I was slowly losing control. The life I had carefully structured, the safe boundaries I had maintained, were dissolving under the weight of his obsession. And yet, there was a part of me, a dark, unacknowledged part, that craved it. To be desired so fiercely, to have someone care with such intensity, even if it was dangerous, it was addicting. Then came the night that changed the rules completely. I had been invited to a gallery opening, a glamorous affair I attended out of curiosity and a small desire to reclaim my independence. I hadn't expected Dominic to be there, but as soon as I entered, his presence was undeniable. He wasn't just attending, he owned the room in the way only he could. Men and women deferred to him instinctively, and yet his eyes were only on me. He approached, slow and deliberate, as though making a statement to the world and to me simultaneously. "You look stunning," he said, his voice low, commanding. "And yet, you look like you're ready to run." "I'm not running," I said, my voice tighter than intended. "I came here to enjoy the evening." He smirked, leaning close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath. "Enjoy it with me. You can't pretend this isn't happening. You can't pretend you're not mine." I felt my heart skip a beat. The audacity of him, the intensity of his gaze, it was overwhelming. And as much as I wanted to resist, I realized he was right. My life had been irrevocably altered the moment I called him an idiot in an expensive suit. That single remark had pulled me into a world of danger, desire, and obsession, and there was no turning back. The night ended with him walking me to my car, his hand brushing mine in a deliberate, possessive gesture. "Sleep well," he murmured, his eyes locking with mine. "And remember, I don't forgive easily, I never forget, and I never let go." As I drove home, my mind raced. Fear, excitement, frustration, and longing collided in a storm I couldn't untangle. Dominic Moretti wasn't just obsessed. He was relentless, powerful, and dangerously alluring. And somehow, against every rational instinct, I knew I was falling into his world, deeper and deeper, with no way to escape. That night, I made a choice. I decided to face the storm rather than run from it. I didn't know if I would survive or if my heart could handle the intensity of someone like Dominic. But one thing was certain, my life would never be the same again. The game had begun, and I was no longer just a spectator. I was a player, caught in the orbit of a man who thrived on obsession, and I couldn't look away. The following week felt like living under a magnifying glass. Every movement I made, every place I went, was somehow tracked, observed, and anticipated. Dominic Moretti's presence had become impossible to ignore, and the intensity of it both terrified and fascinated me. I had always been independent, proud of my ability to navigate life on my own terms, but Dominic had a way of breaking down every carefully constructed wall I had built. He didn't just want to be in my life. He wanted to own it, every moment, every thought. It started subtly at first. A cup of my favorite coffee left at my office with no explanation. A note slipped under my apartment door that read simply, "I was thinking about you." But soon, the gestures became more deliberate, more calculated. One evening, I returned home from work to find the entire living room transformed, candles flickering in crystal holders, soft music filling the space, and a single chair positioned near the window with a view of the city skyline. And on the chair was a note in his unmistakable handwriting. "Sit, look outside, think of me." I didn't want to sit. I didn't want to think of him. I wanted to run. But the truth was I was already ensnared. Against every instinct, I walked to the chair and allowed myself a moment to look at the skyline. My phone buzzed with a message. "You can try to resist me, but you can't hide from me. I see everything. I know everything. And soon you'll know me too." The threat was clear, yet oddly intimate. Dominic had a way of making obsession feel like protection, danger feel like seduction, and fear feel like desire. And it terrified me. Few days later, I found myself at a high-profile charity gala, the same type I had attended when I first insulted him. I thought I might finally reclaim some independence, some semblance of normalcy. But Dominic Moretti had other plans. The moment I stepped inside, he was there. Not hidden in the crowd, not lurking in the shadows. He was standing beside the stage, speaking to powerful men and women, his presence dominating the room. And then, as if the universe had scripted it, our eyes met. He smiled that dangerous, confident smile, and I felt my knees weaken. The whispers around me seemed to fade. All I could see was him. He began walking toward me, cutting through the crowd with a precision that left everyone else seeming invisible. I tried to brace myself, but it was useless. He reached me in seconds, leaning in close enough that I could feel his warmth, the subtle cologne that had become impossible to forget. "You look defiant," he murmured, his voice low, almost a growl. "I like that." "Defiant," I echoed, trying to maintain my composure. "I'm not defiant, I'm cautious." "Cautious?" He raised an eyebrow, eyes glinting with amusement and challenge. "I call it resistance, and resistance makes you even more irresistible." I wanted to step back, to tell him he was crossing a line, but my body betrayed me. I could feel the pull between us, magnetic and undeniable. And yet, fear mingled with desire, creating a tension that was impossible to ignore. The gala passed in a blur. I was aware of him at every turn, every glance, every subtle movement. He was everywhere, yet nowhere, controlling the space around me without even trying. When the event ended, he walked me to my car, his hand brushing mine in that deliberate, possessive way that sent shivers down my spine. "Do you see what I do?" he asked softly, his thumb tracing a circle on the back of my hand. "I don't just pursue, I invade, I dominate. I make sure that nothing, not even your own life, feels the same without me in it." I swallowed hard, my thoughts racing. I wanted to run, yet I wanted to stay. His obsession was suffocating, and yet I couldn't deny the thrill it brought. That night, as I tried to sleep, I realized just how deeply he had infiltrated my life. My dreams were haunted by him, his voice, his gaze, his presence. I woke in the middle of the night to find a single rose on my nightstand, a note that simply said, "You're mine, even in your sleep." I wanted to scream, to throw the rose out the window, to escape the relentless pull he had over me, but I couldn't. I was already too far gone. The following morning, I decided to reclaim some sense of control. I went to the city park, hoping the fresh air and sunlight would clear my head. But even there, he found me. Sitting on a bench nearby, reading a newspaper, his eyes lifted to mine with that same unyielding intensity. He didn't approach immediately. He simply observed, as if daring me to make a move. "Trying to escape me," he called softly, a teasing undertone in his voice. I'm just enjoying the park," I said, my voice faltering. "Enjoying the park," he repeated, standing and walking toward me. "I don't think so. You're thinking about me. I can see it. And I will remind you until you can't stop thinking about me." The audacity, the obsession, the sheer domination of him, it was maddening. And yet I couldn't look away. Every warning I had ignored, every instinct I had buried, was screaming that I was in too deep. Dominic Moretti wasn't just a man. He was a force of nature, and I was caught in his orbit, spinning faster with each passing day. Days turned into nights, and the obsession escalated. He found ways to be in my life without ever being obvious, leaving little reminders that he was watching, waiting, and controlling. My friends noticed my distracted glances, my preoccupation, but I couldn't tell them the truth. How could I explain that the man I had insulted at a gala was now orchestrating every corner of my life, making my pulse race, my thoughts spin, and my desires twist into something dangerous? One evening, after a particularly intense encounter where he cornered me in a boutique, his gaze burning into mine, I realized the full truth. I was no longer resisting. The walls I had built were crumbling, piece by piece. Fear, desire, irritation, and fascination had merged into a chaotic storm that I couldn't control. And Dominic Moretti thrived in that chaos. I hated him. I wanted him gone. And yet I couldn't deny the pull, the dangerous allure that had wrapped itself around my life. I was trapped, willingly or not, in a world I hadn't asked for but couldn't escape. And as I lay in bed that night, my thoughts consumed by him, I realized something terrifying. I was falling. Not just into danger, not just into obsession, but into him. And there was no way back. Life had become a high-stakes game, and Dominic Moretti was the dealer, shuffling the cards with a calm confidence that made my heart pound and my mind spin. Every day brought new reminders that I was no longer living on my own terms. Every corner I turned, every step I took, seemed choreographed by him, orchestrated to keep me off balance, exhilarated, and dangerously close to surrendering. He wasn't just obsessed, he was relentless, and I was caught in a web I could neither avoid nor untangle. It began with subtle invasions of my personal space. My favorite cafe, once a sanctuary, had become a stage for his presence. He would appear at the next table, casually reading a newspaper, then glance up just to catch my eye, making sure I knew he was there. I tried to ignore it, to act as though he was just another person in the room, but it was impossible. The air seemed to thicken the moment he entered, his aura impossible to ignore. Even the barista had started asking, "Is he always with you?" As if they, too, were aware of the invisible tether between us. Then came the more deliberate displays. A black limousine waiting outside my office with the engine running. An invitation to an art exhibit signed simply, "Dominic Moretti, don't be late." Every encounter felt orchestrated, every gesture calculated. And yet with every intrusion I felt my resistance weakening. He wasn't just present. He was invasive, intense, magnetic, and somehow impossibly charming. One evening, I found myself trapped in his world in a way I hadn't anticipated. I had been attending a friend's gallery opening, attempting to reclaim some independence, when a sleek black car pulled up to the entrance. I hesitated, my instincts screaming to turn away, but the driver's window rolled down, revealing Dominic's sharp, dangerous smile. "Get in," he said simply. "You don't have to explain anything to me." I knew I should refuse. I knew I should run. But the magnetic pull of his presence was impossible to resist. The moment I sat inside the car, I felt the familiar thrill, the dangerous excitement that always accompanied him. He didn't speak at first, letting the city lights blur past as silence stretched between us. And then, without warning, he reached over, brushing his hand lightly against mine. A shiver ran through me, a mixture of fear, irritation, and something dangerously close to desire. "You know," he murmured, his voice low and commanding, "you can try to resist me, but it won't work. I don't let go, I don't forget. And I never forgive those who cross me." I swallowed hard, trying to maintain composure. "You're insane," I muttered, though the words felt weak even to me. "Insane," he repeated, eyes narrowing. "No, I'm precise, I'm focused. I see what I want and I take it. That's not insanity, that's determination." By the time the car stopped, we were at a private penthouse overlooking the city. The space was lavish, every detail meticulously arranged. He poured a glass of wine and handed it to me, his gaze locked on mine the entire time. "Sit," he said, indicating a plush chair by the window. "Look at the city, think of me. You already are, whether you admit it or not." I wanted to resist. I wanted to stand, leave, reclaim control of my life. But instead, I found myself sitting, staring out at the cityscape, trapped in the magnetic orbit he had created around me. Every nerve in my body was on edge, every thought consumed by him. I hated the power he held, and yet I couldn't escape it. The next few days blurred together in a mix of obsession, desire, and calculated invasions of my life. He appeared where I least expected him: a restaurant, a bookstore, even outside my gym, each appearance accompanied by a note, a gift, or a whispered reminder that he was always watching, always present, always dominant. Friends began noticing my distracted behavior, my absent-minded glances, but I couldn't explain the truth. How could I tell them that the man I had mocked at a gala was now controlling every aspect of my life, making my pulse race, my thoughts spin, and my desires twist into something both thrilling and terrifying? Then came the encounter that changed everything. I had been invited to a high-profile charity auction, a glamorous affair I attended reluctantly. I didn't expect Dominic to be there, but as soon as I walked into the room, I felt his presence. He wasn't lurking in the shadows. He was standing at the center of the crowd, commanding attention effortlessly. And then, as if drawn by an invisible thread, he walked directly toward me. "You're defiant," he said softly, leaning close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body. "I like that." "Defiant," I repeated, trying to mask the shiver running through me. "I'm cautious." "Cautious?" he asked, a dangerous curve of a smile playing on his lips. "No, resistance is what makes you irresistible." The gala continued around us, but all I could focus on was him. His presence was suffocating, intoxicating, and entirely consuming. When the evening ended, he escorted me to my car, his hand brushing mine in that deliberate, possessive gesture that made my pulse spike. "Remember," he murmured, "I don't forgive easily, I never forget, and I never let go." That night, as I lay in bed, I realized the truth. I was no longer resisting. Fear, desire, irritation, and fascination had merged into a storm I couldn't escape. Dominic Moretti wasn't just obsessed. He was relentless, powerful, and dangerously alluring. And somehow, against every rational instinct, I knew I was falling into his world, deeper and deeper, with no way out. I hated him. I wanted him gone. And yet I couldn't deny the pull, the dangerous allure that had wrapped itself around my life. I was trapped, willingly or not, in a world I hadn't asked for but couldn't escape. And as the city lights flickered outside my window, I realized the most terrifying truth of all: I was already his. The city had become a maze, and Dominic Moretti knew every path, every shortcut, every shadow where I thought I might be safe. I tried to reclaim pieces of my life, small fragments of independence, morning runs, late-night coffee runs, catching up with friends. But each time I felt the invisible weight of him pressing closer. It wasn't just obsession anymore, it was domination. He didn't just follow me, he orchestrated my world. And no matter how much I resisted, No matter how many warnings I whispered to myself, I couldn't escape him. One rainy evening, I found myself in a narrow alley behind my favorite bookstore. I had taken a detour, hopping to lose my thoughts, hopping to find a moment of solitude. But as I turned the corner, there he was, standing under the dim glow of a street lamp, his suit dark and dripping with rain, eyes fixed on me with that unyielding intensity that always made my breath catch. He didn't approach. He didn't speak immediately. He simply watched. The storm of raindrops around him, casting shadows that made him look almost mythical, almost untouchable. "You're predictable," he said finally, his voice low and commanding. "I know where you'll go, even when you think you're clever, even when you try to be free." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my racing heart. "You can't control me," I said, though the words felt hollow. "Control?" he asked, stepping closer, the rain sliding off his jacket. "No, I don't control you. I observe, I understand. And I ensure you're never out of my reach. Not because I need to, but because I choose to." The intensity of his gaze was suffocating. I hated that I wanted to look away, but couldn't. Every instinct in my body screamed danger, and yet there was a magnetism I couldn't resist. The storm around us mirrored the chaos inside me, rain pouring, wind whipping, yet I was rooted, unable to flee from the gravity of his presence. Days passed, each one blurring into the next. Dominic found ways to be in my life without announcement, without explanation, and without giving me a chance to resist. At the grocery store, he would be casually leaning against a display, eyes following me. At my gym, he would appear by the treadmill, reading a magazine, occasionally glancing up to see if I noticed him. Each encounter reminded me that he was everywhere, omnipresent, and that my resistance was futile. Then came the invitation I couldn't refuse. A handwritten note slid under my door one morning, penned in his unmistakable style. "Tonight, my estate, 8 p.m. Come alone, you know you want to." My heart raced, my mind screamed, but a small, reckless part of me, the part I tried to deny, wanted to go. The estate was magnificent, perched on a hill overlooking the city. Every detail was meticulously curated. Candles flickering in ornate holders, music playing softly, the scent of roses drifting through the halls. And there he was, waiting, as if he had been orchestrating every heartbeat, every decision, every hesitation that had led me here. "Welcome," he said, a slow, deliberate smile playing on his lips. "You look hesitant." "I'm not," I started, but he cut me off, stepping closer, his presence overwhelming. "You're terrified," he said softly. "And yet you came. That's what I like about you. You're strong, defiant, and yet irresistibly vulnerable. You can't stay away, and you won't." I wanted to resist, to assert control, to remind him that I wasn't a prize to be claimed. But his gaze, his voice, the magnetism that radiated from him, it was impossible. I felt myself drawn closer, the walls I had built crumbling piece by piece. He reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair from my face. The touch was electric, a shock that sent a thrill through me even as it terrified me. "Do you feel it?" he whispered. "This connection, this tension, the way I dominate your thoughts without even trying." I swallowed hard, words failing me. Yes, I felt it. Terrifying, overwhelming, addictive. And as much as I hated to admit it, I wanted it. The night unfolded in a haze of whispered conversations, stolen glances, and subtle games of dominance. Dominic never raised his voice, never threatened outright, yet every action, every look, every word was carefully measured to make me feel both exhilarated and trapped. He was a storm, and I was powerless to resist. By the time I left his estate, the city streets glistening from the rain, I realized the truth. I was lost. Not in the physical sense, but in a deeper, more dangerous way. Dominic Moretti had invaded every corner of my life, every thought, every heartbeat. I hated him. I feared him. And yet I couldn't stop thinking about him. I couldn't stop wanting him, even as every rational instinct screamed that this obsession was dangerous, all-consuming, and likely irreversible. Over the next few days, the intensity escalated. Flowers appeared on my doorstep, gifts at my office, and subtle reminders that he was always watching, always present, and always in control. Friends tried to warn me, but how could I explain that the man I had mocked at a gala was now dictating the rhythm of my life, making every heartbeat, every thought, and every decision revolve around him. One evening, as I walked home through the quiet streets, my phone buzzed. A message from him. "Look outside." I hesitated, heart pounding, but curiosity, dangerous, irresistible curiosity, won. Through my window, I saw his car parked across the street, headlights casting long shadows. And for a moment, I felt a mix of fear, irritation, and something I couldn't name, something dangerously intoxicating. Dominic Moretti wasn't just obsessed. He was relentless, powerful, and unyielding. And I, against every instinct, against every rational thought, was already falling into his world. The storm had consumed me, and there was no turning back. By now, it was impossible to separate my life from Dominic Moretti's. Every corner I turned, every step I took, seemed scripted by him. He had become both my shadow and my storm, present in ways I could see and ways I couldn't. Friends worried, strangers stared, but I couldn't explain the truth. Dominic's obsession was suffocating, exhilarating, and intoxicating all at once. I hated him. I feared him. And yet I couldn't stop thinking about him. Every heartbeat, every thought, every whispered desire had begun to revolve around him. The escalation began one rainy evening. I had tried desperately to reclaim a fragment of my independence. A quiet walk through the city, hopping the rain, would wash away the tension, the obsessive pull, the thrill and fear that had taken over my life. But the moment I stepped onto the empty street, I felt it, the magnetic, suffocating presence of him. And there he was, leaning casually against a sleek black car, rain dripping off his jacket, eyes fixed on me with that sharp, unreadable gaze. "You're predictable," he said, voice low and dangerous. "No matter what you do, I can always find you. You can try to escape, but I know every path, every detour, every hiding place. And you're mine." I wanted to protest. I wanted to shout, to push back, to assert some control over my life. But the intensity in his eyes, the power in his presence, made me freeze. My heart pounded in my chest, and a part of me, a dark, secretive part I hadn't acknowledged, thrived on it. He stepped closer, the rain washing over both of us, and I could feel the warmth radiating from him despite the storm. "Do you feel it?" he whispered. "This tension between us, this pull, you can't resist me. You already belong in my world, whether you admit it or not." I wanted to run, but my legs refused. Fear, desire, and fascination collided in a chaotic storm that left me powerless. I hated him for the hold he had over me, for the way he had invaded every corner of my life. And yet, I couldn't deny it. I wanted him, even as every rational thought screamed that this was dangerous, destructive, and potentially irreversible. The next days were a blur of subtle invasions and impossible encounters. Flowers appeared on my doorstep with notes that reminded me of his omnipresence. "Even when you think you're alone, I'm here, always." At the office, a package containing my favorite dessert arrived with a single card. "I know your tastes, I know your world, and soon you'll know mine." I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and terrified. And yet I was hooked. I hated the way he made me feel. I hated that I couldn't resist. Then came the night that changed everything. A private invitation arrived, delivered by a courier I didn't recognize. "Tonight, my estate, 9 p.m. Come alone, you can't refuse me." My heart raced, my instincts screamed to stay away, but curiosity, thrill, and something darker, something dangerously intoxicating, pulled me toward him. The estate was enormous, perched on a hill overlooking the city lights, every corner illuminated with soft golden lamps. I stepped inside, and the scent of roses and polished wood enveloped me. He was waiting in the grand hall, standing near a fireplace, the glow of the flames casting shadows across his face. He smiled when he saw me, slow, deliberate, and entirely dangerous. "You came," he said, stepping toward me. "I knew you would, you always do." "I don't belong here," I whispered, trying to assert some semblance of control. "You do," he said firmly, closing the distance between us. "Whether you realize it or not, you belong with me. Your world, your life, your thoughts, they all revolve around me now, and I don't plan on letting go." His presence was suffocating, magnetic, overwhelming. I hated him for it. I feared him. And yet, I felt myself leaning closer, drawn into the storm he had created around me. Every instinct, every shred of resistance was dissolving under the weight of his obsession. We spent the night talking, walking through his estate and sharing moments that were simultaneously terrifying and thrilling. He revealed glimpses of his world, the power, the danger, the enemies, and the carefully constructed empire that made him untouchable. And yet, despite his ruthlessness, his obsession with me was undeniable. Every word, every glance, every subtle touch was measured, calculated, and designed to make me feel both trapped and exhilarated. By the time I left, the rain had stopped, and the city sparkled beneath the night sky. I realized something terrifying. I was no longer resisting. I was falling, head first, unprepared, and utterly captivated. Dominic Moretti had invaded every corner of my life, every thought, every heartbeat. I hated him, feared him, and yet I wanted him. The following days blurred into a cycle of obsession, temptation, and dangerous encounters. He found ways to be in my life without ever announcing himself, leaving gifts, notes, and reminders of his omnipresence. I tried to reclaim control, but every attempt failed. Friends noticed my distracted behavior, my obsession with a man I couldn't explain. I couldn't tell them the truth, that the man I had mocked at a gala was now orchestrating every part of my life, pulling me deeper into a world of power, danger, and obsession. Then came the encounter that pushed me to the edge. I had gone out for a late-night walk to clear my mind when I saw his car parked across the street. My heart raced, my thoughts scrambled. A message appeared on my phone. "Look outside!" Against every instinct, I obeyed. There he was, standing under the street lamp, the rain beginning again, eyes locked on mine. I felt the pull, the danger, the obsession, and the thrill, all in one suffocating moment. Dominic didn't move immediately. He simply watched, his presence a storm that consumed everything around him. Then he stepped closer, the rain soaking his jacket, the intensity of his gaze making my chest tighten. "You can't run from me," he said, voice low, commanding. "I don't let go, I don't forgive, I don't forget, and soon you'll realize you can't resist me." In that instant, I understood the truth. I was no longer just a participant in this dangerous game. I was a player, caught in the gravity of a man who thrived on obsession, power, and control. My resistance was futile. My heart, my mind, my very life had become entwined with Dominic Moretti, and there was no escape. I hated him, I feared him, and yet I wanted him. The storm that had been Dominic Moretti's presence in my life reached its peak that night. It wasn't a storm of rain or wind, but a storm of obsession, desire, and danger that had consumed every corner of my world. For months, he had been omnipresent. Every gift, every message, every calculated encounter had pulled me closer, had stripped away my independence, and had made me realize the terrifying truth. I was already his. I hated him. I feared him. And yet, I wanted him in a way I could no longer deny. It began with a text, deceptively simple. "Tonight, my world, come alone." My heart raced as I read it. I knew what awaited me, and yet I obeyed. The city felt tense as I walked toward the familiar sleek black car waiting for me, the headlights cutting through the darkness like beacons. Dominic was already there, waiting as always, his gaze fixed on me with that unrelenting intensity. When he spoke, it was as if he commanded not only my attention but my very heartbeat. "You're here. Good. I knew you would be." I tried to maintain some control, some semblance of independence. "Why me?" I asked, voice trembling slightly. "Why this obsession?" He smiled, slow and deliberate like a predator savoring the chase. "Obsession? Call it what you will. I see you. I want you. And I will not stop until I have you. You've been in my life since that moment you dared to mock me, and I've been captivated ever since." The ride to his estate was silent except for the faint hum of the engine. Every instinct screamed danger. Every nerve in my body told me to flee, yet I found myself unable to resist him. When we arrived, the estate loomed like a fortress, every detail meticulously arranged, every light casting shadows that danced like whispers of his control. He didn't wait for me to enter. He simply opened the door, gesturing me inside with a confidence that left no room for argument. Inside, the space was breathtaking. Candles flickered, casting a warm glow across polished wood and marble floors. The scent of roses filled the air. Music played softly, its rhythm matching the tension thrumming between us. Dominic was already there, leaning against the grand staircase, his suit impeccable, his eyes locked on mine. "Welcome," he said, voice low and commanding. "Tonight you will understand why resistance is futile, why desire is unavoidable, Why you belong to me. I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. I don't belong to anyone, I whispered, but the words felt weak even as I said them. You do, he countered, stepping closer. You always have, you just didn't know it. Every glance, every thought, every heartbeat, you've been mine since the moment you dared to call me an idiot in a suit. I wanted to argue. I wanted to reclaim control. But the intensity of his presence, the magnetic pull of his gaze, made it impossible. He closed the distance, his hand brushing mine, a touch that was both gentle and possessive, igniting something deep inside me that I hadn't dared to admit existed. The night unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of tension and desire. Dominic revealed pieces of his world, the power, the danger, the enemies, the empire he commanded with ruthless precision. But through it all, his obsession with me was undeniable. Every word, every glance, every subtle gesture was designed to make me feel both vulnerable and exhilarated, to make me realize that I could no longer resist him. Hours passed, and I felt the walls I had built around my heart crumble, piece by piece. Fear and desire merged, creating a storm inside me that mirrored the intensity of Dominic's control. I hated that I wanted him, that I was drawn to him, that every instinct in my body obeyed him even as my mind screamed danger. And yet, I couldn't deny the truth. I was falling completely, irrevocably into his world. Finally, he stepped closer, his eyes searching mine as if trying to read every thought, every hidden desire. Do you understand now? He asked, voice low, almost a growl. Do you feel it, the pull between us, the obsession? You can fight it, deny it, even hate it, but it's stronger than you, stronger than me, stronger than anything, and you will give in, you already have. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My chest heaved, my thoughts scattered, and my heart surrendered even as my mind resisted. He leaned closer, his lips brushing mine in a touch that was electric, consuming, and inevitable. The world outside disappeared. There was no fear, no hesitation, only the intensity of the moment, the undeniable connection that had been building since the day I mocked him. When we finally parted, the tension between us had shifted. It was no longer just obsession or pursuit. It was recognition, acknowledgement, and surrender. I realized with a shock that I had crossed the invisible boundary I had tried so hard to maintain. Dominic Moretti had not only invaded my life, he had claimed it, not with violence or force, but with the unstoppable power of his presence, his obsession, and the dangerous allure that had drawn me in from the very beginning. In the quiet that followed, as the city lights twinkled below and the estate hummed with a calm intensity, I understood the truth. My life had been irrevocably changed. Dominic Moretti wasn't just a man obsessed with me. He was a storm, a force of nature, a danger I could neither resist nor escape. And I was entirely, irrevocably his. The days that followed were a delicate balance of fear, desire, and surrender. He continued to infiltrate every corner of my life, but now it felt different. It wasn't just control or obsession. It was an acknowledgement of our shared intensity, a dangerous but undeniable connection that neither of us could deny. I hated him. I feared him. And yet, I couldn't imagine life without him, couldn't imagine stepping away from the storm he had brought into my world. Eventually, I stopped trying to resist. Not because I had given up, but because I had realized that the life I wanted, the intensity I craved, the passion I couldn't deny, all of it existed with him. Dominic Moretti had become both my danger and my desire, my torment and my obsession, and I knew with terrifying clarity that I would never be free of him, or want to be. As the sun rose over the city, casting golden light across the skyline, I understood one final truth. I had called him an idiot in an expensive suit, once, thinking it was just a joke. But that joke had changed everything. It had brought Dominic Moretti into my life, into my heart, and into the very core of my existence. And now there was no turning back. I was his, completely, irrevocably, forever.